Hello, my name is Adam. I'm on a mission to become the most prolific reviewer of all time. And to do that, I review books, movies, podcasts, plays, whatever. And today I am reviewing a documentary called Mr. Nobody Against Putin. And it's the story of a teacher in a small town in Russia. Karabakh, I think, is the name of the town in the Ural Mountains. And Karabakh is famous because it's the most polluted place on earth. And many people, before the situation of the full scale invasion of Ukraine by the Russians, went there as a sort of like, hey, we're in the most toxic place on earth. But this teacher, he really likes his work. He works at a primary school and he is the director of social activities there. So he films graduations and organizes graduations, dances, things like that for the kids. And he grew up in this place and he loves the place. But in 2022, when Putin made the decision to invade Ukraine on a full scale, the, the Russian government decided to slowly take over the education and switch it from being more about education to being more about patriotism and drilling future soldiers for the army. And the documentary is basically like showing this guy who is doing his job, and his job slowly switches from being a teacher to a propagandist for the regime. And he does a few things of resistance. Like, one, he plays Lady Gaga's version of the American national anthem, which is a weird choice for resistance. But in another, like, all of the school windows have like this Z, which I don't know if that's a thing nowadays in Russia. But in the beginning, the Z was like supporting Russian invasion of Ukraine. And so he changes the tape from a Z to an X. So X is supposed to like support Ukrainian refugees or whatever. And he has on his wall like this, so he has like this office where the kids can come in and talk to him, and he has this sort of pro democracy flag. And in the beginning, I mean, it's okay. He has an opinion about it, but you can see how the government controls more and more of what can be said in an education system. And it's interesting because he grew up after the Soviets, but before this period. So Russian society was a bit more open, and he is sad for what is the loss of this openness in education. And he's also sad, of course, because of the war and students that he knows are going to Ukraine and being killed, and some friends of his get drafted and get killed. But and he shows the pain on the kid's face when they, because the problem about Russia, and it's a problem in many societies, especially when they get into a war situation, is you can't say the truth anymore. Because if you say the truth, then people get offended by it and it's dangerous for you. So, what the truth is that the war was a bad decision for Russia and Russians, normal Russians. And their friends are dying, their neighbors are dying, and they're dying, you know. And the interesting thing too is they have like this pro-war demonstration in the beginning of the war in 2022, and the guy is filming it because he's a videographer. So as I said, he's a bit of a propagandist for the regime. So he's filming it, and there's maybe about 20 cars And this is it's a small town. It's like 10,000 people. But 20 cars for a pro-war demonstration in a town that big? That seems very small for me. So even the most enthusiastic Russians about this invasion were a very small minority. And over time, that enthusiasm gets smaller and smaller when the consequences of the war become bigger. Because Putin's whole thing was to keep people apathetic. And one of the characters, not characters, a real person named Masha, she's talking about the fact that her brother gets sent to the front lines in Ukraine. And she says to this guy that her and her mother didn't care about the war as long as it didn't affect them. So her brother gets drafted and it starts to affect them. Eventually he dies. And the the director can't actually go and film the funeral because obviously he would be arrested, but he records it, and you can hear like it's not the funeral of Masha's brother, but it's the funeral of somebody else. So he's recording it, and you hear the mother just go, it's heartbreaking because she's like, "Oh my boy, oh my boy, oh my boy, why didn't you let me be closer to my boy when he was alive? And now he's dead, and I don't have the chance to be close to him anymore." And you see the graveyard of this small town. It's like 10,000 people, as I mentioned, and there are flowers on fresh graves. There's like he doesn't do a big panning shot, but you can see like a small shot, and he's focused on this one grave because he's interviewing Masha, whose brother died, and you can see there are three other new graves. So it's having a big effect on Russia. But as I said before, the scary part about it is that Putin is training entire generations to serve in this war. They have, at the end when the guy leaves, because he leaves his job eventually, they're like marching in the halls and practicing marching in the halls. And these are like 11, 12-year olds. So I think that Putin kind of understood after the initial pushback of the Ukrainians that this was going to be a very long war. And he is really prepared to do whatever it takes to win the war. Will he win the war? In my opinion, he's already lost it, and Ukraine has lost it because they've lost so many people on both sides. So whatever territorial gains Russia actually takes from Ukraine, they've taken it with an entire generation of people who died in Ukraine or people who left Russia. And they've kind of destroyed this whole generation of people. And unlike previously in Russian history, where generations were destroyed not necessarily through their own doing, through Russia's doing, this is completely the fault of Russians' leadership. And I think that the documentary is quite good because it shows that these are normal kids and the teachers are normal people, but they have this pressure on them to do this propaganda because the government says the propaganda is necessary to win the war. And there's this one guy, and it's kind of a weird part of the movie because there's a history teacher, and the history teacher represents Putin's party, basically, in the school. So he's kind of like a commissar, if you don't know Russian history. So the Red Army was created after the Russian Revolution, and they weren't exactly sure of the loyalty of the people because some of them had been Tsarist troops. So they would insert like a party official to keep track and keep the army people loyal, and that was a commissar. So I think so. Anyway, so you have this guy from the party, and the weird thing is, he looks a bit creepy, but he also seems to be a normal but creepy guy. And he's talking about, so the director is recording, because he had to recording these lessons that the teachers are giving with this new patriotic curriculum, and the the party apparatchik guy is saying these like crazy things like, you know, you can't have any dissent in a country because if you have dissent in a country, it's not unified, and a country that's not unified will fall apart, which is, you need dissent in a country because if you don't have dissent, you don't have any other opinions, and nothing ever changes, and then it falls apart, right? Or if you disagree with anything our country does, you should leave. Like if you disagree with anything our country does, you should leave. You're not a patriot. And this kind of breaks the guy's heart, the director's heart, because he's like, I am such a patriot. I love, and he says, well, he loves the pollution, he loves the pipes, he loves the copper piles, which is a little bit weird. But you can tell he really does love his hometown and he does love his country. So it's kind of a lie to say, if you disagree with this war, you're not a Russian. And but the great part about the movie, like I said, is that he is not shown as being like this evil guy. He's just a history teacher with some opinions which are really popular in Russia right now. And they do this one part where they have a contest in the city for the best teacher, and the best teacher will be given this free apartment in the center of town, like very luxurious and stuff. And the history teacher actually wins it. And the the filmmaker doesn't really say this, but he's kind of suggesting that he wins it because of his connections with the regime, and that might be 100% true. But it also might be that this guy is really, really popular because apparently the students and the parents voted on this. He might be really, really popular with the parents because, you know, they kind of did support the war. Maybe not massively. It was 20 cars, but maybe they, if they had a choice between supporting the war or not supporting the war, they probably would support the war. And I think that it's a good examination of how war really changes societies. And it's easy to look at that in Russia and be like, oh yeah, that's a Russian problem. But I remember the same sort of thing happened in Iraq in 2003. Like, I remember going to anti-war protests and saying, this war is not about weapons of mass destruction. There are no weapons of mass destruction there. And, you know, the American media was like really, really gung-ho, like, yeah, we need to get rid of Saddam. And then people who were saying Saddam has no connection to Al Qaeda were like, no, 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 you're wrong, you're wrong. They're like friends, they're buddies, whatever. And it's only like, what, 22 years after that happened that people, the mainstream, have said, yeah, that was a ridiculous thing. Like, why did we do that? But there was such, in the United States, this, so you needed to support the troops, and if you didn't support the troops, you were unloyal and disloyal. And there's interesting cultural artifacts of that you can see if you look for them. I think I watched the whole Bones series like last year or the year before, and in that there are like Bones, who is supposed to be this like super intelligent, rational character, goes really hard against anti-war protesters because she has like some friends or family who are in the military, and like they don't understand. And it's like, and basically, there's a character on that who is a conspiracy theorist, and he is basically saying that Iraq doesn't have any weapons of mass destruction. And in this show that was broadcast to millions of normal Americans, they're laughing at him, saying that he's wrong. But of course, he was right. Like, they just presented it as this conspiracy theory to kind of discredit it, but it wasn't a conspiracy theory at the time. It was just a fact. So these sort of things can happen in any country when a war is declared. And unfortunately, war does erode people's freedoms. And if you have a country like Russia, where the level of freedom wasn't very high to begin with, then it's going to get worse and worse and worse. So I think it's a really fascinating look at that kind of process. So if you're interested, the film is called Mr. Nobody Against Putin. Please leave your thoughts about that movie in the comment section where it belongs. Your thoughts, I mean, not the movie. The movie belongs where you can find it. All right, thank you. Bye-bye.